Hello and welcome back. My name is Nathan House and I am with the Church of Christ in Houston, California. And if you could like or subscribe to this video, that would be appreciated. So we're going to be back in the book of Habakkuk, chapter 3. We're going to finish this short little book today. So if you've not watched the first two videos, I would encourage you, first of all, to go watch those two videos. So we pick up here where Habakkuk has made a complaint that the sins of Judah are horrible. And so he's complained to God and he's asked God, where are you? So then God responded to Habakkuk, okay, Habakkuk, I will come and I will punish Judah. And I'm going to punish Judah using the nation of Babylon. Well, then Habakkuk had another complaint. The idea of God punishing Judah with the wicked nation of Babylon bothered him because he says, how can you use Babylon to punish Judah? Yes, Judah is bad, but they're more wicked. So Habakkuk is having a problem with what he thinks is a problem on God's justice. So that takes us into chapter 2, where then God answers Habakkuk and his second complaint. And God speaks to him and he assures him that he will hold Babylon accountable as well as Judah. And so we see God telling Habakkuk, yes, I will punish Judah. Yes, I will also punish Babylon. So then in chapter 3, Habakkuk sings a prayer or has a prayer that he states regarding this upcoming judgment of God. And so let's go ahead and read. I'm going to go over here to the ESV. It says, a prayer of Habakkuk the prophet according to Shigionoth. Now, I don't know what this means. There's different debates. I'm not going to worry about that. You can do your own study on that if you would like. A prayer of Habakkuk. So we're introduced to this idea of a prayer. So what is the prayer? O Lord, I have heard the report of you, and your work, O Lord, do I fear. In the midst of the years, revive it. Revive what? Well, I think he's talking about God's work. Revive your work. Revive your purpose, your plan for Israel, for Judah. Revive your work. In the midst of the years, make it known. And then watch this. In wrath, because God was going to pour out his wrath upon Judah, and he was going to pour out his wrath upon Babylon. In wrath, here's the request. Remember to be merciful, God. So again, he has this prayer to God. God, I've heard about you. I've heard of the past. The New Living Translation translates it this way. I have heard all about you, Lord. I am filled with awe by your amazing works. In this time of our deep need, help us again as you did in the years gone by. And in your anger, remember mercy. So he says, revive this work that you've done in the past. He says, in the time of our need, help us again. Just like you have in the past, help us again. But here's this aspect of God's anger that becomes very significant going through the rest of this chapter. God's anger is a very common idea here. And there'll be different words that Habakkuk uses. There's anger, indignation, fury, wrath. And these are things that are attributed to God in this chapter. God's anger towards Judah, God's anger towards Babylon. And so Habakkuk is saying, he's thankful that God is doing what he's doing, but he also says, God, remember in your wrath to be merciful. So then he begins to, I believe, look back. I believe this is a reference back to the time God came from Mount Paran. So this is the area around where Mount Sinai was. So I believe this is talking about when God came to Egypt. So he said, God came from Teman, and the Holy One from Mount Paran. His splendor covered the heavens, and the earth was full of his praise. His brightness was like the light rays flashed from his hand, and there he veiled his power. Before him went pestilence, and plague followed at his heels. So again, I believe this is kind of looking back towards God's past, right? In the midst of the years, revive it. In the midst of the years, make it known. He's heard the report of what God has done. And he wants God to do it again, but do so with mercy. Remember during this time your mercy. But it's interesting also to notice something else. We see God, and God is pictured frequently in Scripture as a warrior, as a mighty warrior. And so you kind of see this aspect of God, the warrior, in this as well. You'll see references to his power, the lightning that comes forth from him, his wrath, horses and chariots, bows and arrows, his spear in verse 11. And the idea here is that this warrior, God, the righteous warrior, is coming in judgment. And so we'll see again, his judgment becomes all through here. We see his judgment. Here we see it, his pestilence that broke forth. We're going to see how the earth shakes and scatters. We're going to see how God's coming in judgment impacted the creation itself. And so all of these things, we're going to see God's judgment, another thing, against the nations. So God, the righteous warrior, this is what he's doing. He is bringing his judgment. And how is his judgment impacting things? Again, it's going to impact creation. It's going to impact the enemies. So here we have a reference to enemies of Israel, right? Cush and Cushan and Midian. These were enemies. We see the impact. The pestilence went before him. He stood and measured the earth. And notice how, again, he looked and shook the nations. So the earth, the nations. We see these things concerning creation, the eternal mountains, in the presence of the mighty warrior, the eternal mountains scattered. Everlasting hills. So these things which have, again, a mountain seems from all human perspective to be eternal and everlasting. In the presence of God, the warrior coming in judgment, bringing his wrath, these things scattered, they sank low. And again, verse 8, he talks about, God's wrath again and its impact on creation. Was your wrath against the creation? Was your wrath against the rivers? Was your anger against the rivers? Or your indignation? So again, wrath, anger, indignation. Was it against the sea when you rode on your horse? So here's this coming warrior on your chariot of salvation. And so here God is pictured and he's bringing this judgment. And yet Habakkuk says that the chariot that he is riding on is a chariot of what? Salvation. So again, it's interesting to note. God's coming was not against creation, was it? It's not against them, verse 8. But it is against the enemies of God. It is against Cushan and Midian. It was against Egypt. And yet all of these images of creation, right, is just showing how far-reaching God's judgment was going to be. Notice let's skip down here to verse 12. You marched through the earth in fury. So again, notice this aspect of anger, wrath. You threshed the nations in anger. You went out for look at this word, for the salvation of your people. He's riding on a chariot of salvation. And yes, he is bringing judgment. And yet it is for the salvation of his people. He is going to judge his own people. But again, why is he doing that? Ultimately, it is for their salvation. He's going to be coming in judgment against the Babylonians. You went out for the salvation of your people. And again, all through here, this aspect of God is highlighted, right? It's God doing this. Habakkuk speaking to God, second person, right? God did this. You marched through the earth. So notice God's actions all through here. You stripped the earth from your bow. You split the earth with rivers. You marched through the earth in fury. You threshed the nations in anger. You went out for the salvation. You crushed the head of the house of the wicked. You pierced with his own arrows the heads of his warriors who came like a whirlwind to scatter me. And I believe the me here referencing, of course, Habakkuk, of course, but I think it's probably applied more broad to the nation of Judah. Rejoicing as if to devour the poor in secret. You trample the sea with your horses. Again, all these images of God as a warrior keep coming through here. And the purpose of the coming warrior? To punish the wicked. Verse 12. The purpose of the coming warrior? For the salvation of his people. Verse 8, right? Chariot of salvation. Verse 13. You went out for the salvation of your people, for the salvation of your anointed. So what do we see? What are some things we can make some observations from here? First of all, what do we notice? God is in control. Babylon was this mighty, powerful nation. It was going to come against Judah, but make no mistake, God was in control. You did this, God. You did this. You did this. 8 times Habakkuk uses this you, second person, right? Depicting God's actions. God is in control. What is God doing? He's coming to punish the wicked, and at the same time, he is coming to save his people. Verse 16, he hears God trampling. I hear and my body trembles as he hears God trampling. My lips quiver at the sound. Rottenness, he's terrified. Rottenness enters into my bones. my legs tremble beneath me, because again, God was going to use Babylon to punish Judah. Is that a frightening thing if you're Judah? Yes, it is. So God is using Babylon to punish Judah. And yet now here we also have this image of God coming to punish Babylon. All of these things, and again, what exactly is causing him this fear? Is it simply God coming? Perhaps. Is it God's use of Babylon to judge and to punish Judah? Perhaps. But he says, rottenness enters my bones, my legs tremble beneath me. All of these things, but then look at what he says. Yet I will quietly wait for the day of trouble to come upon the people who invade us. I'm going to wait patiently, Lord, because he began by asking God, when are you going to punish Judah? He says, I will punish them. I'm going to use Babylon. Habakkuk said, I don't like that answer. Babylon is wicked. And so God tells him, I will punish Babylon too. He says, I will quiet. So Habakkuk says, I will quietly wait for the day of trouble to come upon people who invade us. For an alternative reading, I'm not going to get off onto this, but if you want to do a little reading, go read this in the New American Standard and compare these two translations there, which give a different feel, different understanding. But the point here, using the ESV, seems to be that as Habakkuk waits, he's waiting for God to come and punish, and he's waiting for God to do so. He waits quietly for this day of trouble. When you go back to chapter 2, what did God tell Habakkuk? He says, the Lord is in his holy temple. Again, God is in control. Babylon might seem to be the one in control, but don't be mistaken. God is in his temple. As a result of this, let all the earth keep silence before him. Keep silent before him, Habakkuk. So then Habakkuk says, I will quietly wait. Let's finish this chapter up, a couple of more verses. Though the fig tree, look at this, though the fig tree should blossom, should not blossom, and there's no fruit on the grapevines, and though the olive tree doesn't produce any olives, and though every single field there's no food, and if every single flock is cut off, if there's no herd in the stalls, if all of these bad things happen, look at what Habakkuk says. If all of these things happen, yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will take joy in the God of my salvation. God, so this is the phrase Yahweh, it's all capitals. God the Lord is my strength. Habakkuk is coming to a deeper place, a deeper understanding of God, God's justice, God's judgment, God's love, God's salvation. He makes my feet like the deer's. He makes me tread upon my high places. So here Habakkuk in verse 17 paints a very bleak picture. If all of these things come, these bad things, all these hardships, I'm still going to rejoice in the God of my salvation. And so it really there's a lesson here for us. Are we willing to say, even if the blessings of God dry up, are we willing to say, I will rejoice in the Lord, I will take joy in the God of my salvation? I can't help but reading this, I can't help but seeing something similar in the book of Job, chapter 1. Look at what Job says after his afflictions became great on him. Then Job arose and tore his robe and shaved his head and fell on his ground. And what did he do? He worshiped. And look at what he said. Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked shall I return. The Lord gave, the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. And then we have this comment. In all of this, Job did not sin or charge God with wrong. So Job says, in spite of everything going bad, I'm going to worship God and I'm going to praise his name. And that's very similar to the words of Habakkuk. If all of these bad things happen, yet I will rejoice in the Lord. Are we able to say that? Are we willing to say that? Habakkuk's message to himself, to the nation of Judah, to us is this. It goes back to chapter 2, verse 4, where God tells Habakkuk, he says to Habakkuk in chapter 2, verse 4, the righteous live by faith. What is the message to us? We live by faith. Even in dark times, even when things are going bad, we live by faith. We trust in God to intervene. I will quietly wait. Why can I quietly wait? Because I live by faith even in dark times. Are we willing to say the same thing in our lives? Are we willing to say to God, no matter what happens in my life, I will praise you and honor you, and I will rejoice in you because you are the God of my salvation? I know that's often a struggle for me. You're probably the same way. But let's remember who our God is, and let's remember that we are a people that live by faith. You guys have a great day. God bless.